Introduction, I have very little realizations, especially as compared to the many great souls who are on this Zoom meeting today. And I'm just very fortunate that I am able to come here and very privileged to be able to speak to you all about this topic. Excuse me, I have a dry asthmatic cough that comes on every winter because of the dry air, and it disappears when spring comes. I assure you it's not COVID. It's happened for 20 something years that I've known of. So before we begin, I should have checked before. Is the volume okay? Volume is good? Okay. So let's begin with a brief Mangalacharana prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschata Deshatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gaura Jai Shri Shradha Murlidhar Ki Jai Narsimhadev Bhagavan Ki Jai. Can I share my screen? Okay. So the reason I picked this topic is because it's something that I myself struggle with. So far from being any kind of authority on how to practice tolerance or how to develop tolerance, I was hoping that by researching and studying about this topic from the angle of Bhakti Yoga and speaking about it today and answering questions and hearing your realizations, it would actually help me in my own life in terms of developing tolerance. But I wanted to start with the pursuit of control. So are we in control of what happens to us and with us? Anyone?
To some extent.
Sure. And when you say to some extent, any examples?
When I'm angry and I can manage it. Like if I'm anxious, I can learn the skills to manage it. So things like that. And then hard work as well. Like I think no, perhaps not the hard work because destiny is involved there. But yeah, like the things that concern us, anger and anxiety and things like that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very, very true what you said. Anyone else would like to volunteer?
Hare Krishna, Yasoda, Dulal, Prabhu,
Haribol, Athena, how are you?
Well, thank you. Happy New Year. I apologize. I'm reading. Are you asking what are we actually in control of? I would say that we are in control of our choices in one sense. For example, I could right now go and eat a beef steak. No one's stopping me. One could go rob a bank right now. One could go to a nightclub. So we do, in one sense, have some free will given our karma and facilities. So in some ways, we are in control of our choices.
Wonderful answer. Thank you, both of you. All right, then I'm going to actually move on and ask another question. Are we in control of what happens around us? Someone else who's not spoken, maybe?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I think it's like we are not in control of what is happening around us, that we again, like how what Athana Mataji said, we have a choice to be with like who like what people or what surroundings we want to be around us. So in that way, yeah.
Okay, that's a nice answer. And lastly, is it a matter of degree, or is our control or lack of control absolute? Meaning, are we completely in control, or are we completely out of control, or is there some degrees there? Let me ask Gaur Kumar Prabhu.
To some degree.
Yeah, we are not in absolute control or absolute lack of control, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So then I'm actually going to, hold on. So I can't see the top of the screen. This is, what do you see on top, Gaur Kumar?
Lord Krishna and his energies.
Thank you, because you know what's happening? The menu is hiding my screen.
Yeah, that can happen.
So, all right. So why I wanted to go to this next is all about control. So Lord Krishna and his energies. This is beautiful Madhav from Mayapur. And we hear this frequently. And, you know, over the years, I would hear this, that Krishna has 3 types of energies. And then I would hear 3 other types of energies, and it always confused me. So I like to put things in some visual graphical formats, which are easy to understand. So, so the first thing is Antaranga Shakti. Krishna has his internal energy, right? And we'll come to that in a little bit. Then he has the Bahiranga Shakti, the external or the material energy. And then there is the Tathastha Shakti, which is the marginal energy. So we're going to come back to this. Antaranga Shakti is further divided into 3. One is the Sandhini Shakti of Sri Krishna, which is the energy which maintains all spiritual existence. Then there is the Samvit Shakti, which is the energy by which Krishna knows everything. And lastly, there is the Ladini Shakti, which is the source of all pleasure. And the personification of Ladini Shakti is none other than Srimati Radharani. And so Krishna has 3 energies, which are the 3 across, Antaranga, Bahiranga, and Tathastha. And then his Antaranga Shakti is divided into 3 further parts, Sandhini, Samvit, and Ladini. So maybe all of you were very clear about this in the beginning to start with. But, you know, till I laid it out like this, I would always confuse which of these 6 am I talking about. So far, so good? So then I want to talk about the Tathastha Shakti, which is that marginal energy. You see this man, he's on the shore, and he's on the edge of the shore, and he's about to enter the ocean. And this man was in the ocean. He's on the edge of the ocean, and he's about to enter the shore, the land, right? So the Tathastha, Tat means shore. Tathastha Shakti or marginal energy literally means energy that is on the shore. But on the shore of what? It's the shore of material energy or spiritual or internal energy, which we saw earlier, right? And that marginal energy is all the living entities. That's all of us, all the living souls that we see everywhere in the universe. That's the marginal energy. And why are we called marginal? The only thing we can control is whether we want to be under the control of the material energy or the spiritual energy. And we are always on the shore. Think about our own spiritual life on a daily basis. Aren't we always like somewhat fluctuating between the material and the spiritual? We want to be constantly spiritually energized and spiritually enlivened and uplifted, but we have to deal with the material energy. And then sometimes it drags us down or sucks us in. And then we feel the waves of the ocean, the material energy. And then we want to rush back and be in the spiritual energy by being in satsangs like this, or going to the temple, or participating in kirtan, or reading Bhagavad Gita, or something, spiritual. So we are always on the shore and we are always under control. But the one thing we do control is, do I want to be under the control of the material energy, or do I want to be under the control of the spiritual energy? And we're going to explore this topic more. By the way, Gaurakumar Prabhu, should we have questions at the end, or do people interject and ask as we go along? How do you
We
like
can
it?
have questions at the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, again, because I can't really see the title, is all control bad or doomed to fail? Maybe, Gaurakumar, when I go to the next slide of any slide, can you read out the title?
I'll do that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, because this Zoom title bar is obscuring the top. So the answer is no. So what sort of control is not only good, but it's actually recommended by Krishna as well as the great devotees? So the first is control of one's mind, body, and senses. One's thoughts, speech, and actions. Krishna tells Arjuna in 6th chapter, 15th verse, thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist or the yogi, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God at the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence. So control of the mind, body, and activities, something Krishna is telling Arjuna to do. Krishna is telling Uddhav, his dear devotee, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Uddhav Gita, Canto 11, chapter 16, verse 44, being surrendered to me, that is Krishna, one should control the speech, mind, and life air. And then, through loving devotional intelligence, one will completely fulfill the mission of life. What is the next title? What sort of, I can't read it fully.
What sort of control is bad and doomed to fail?
Okay. The first is trying to control others. And the other is control for the sake of exploiting, whether it's others or material energy. Now, this is always an interesting discussion that happens. People always say, well, to exist in the material world, you have to have some level of control over what happens and what you do. You have to plan, you have to execute those plans. Sometimes if you're in a managerial position, it means that you have to control others. But really what is deemed bad by scripture is controlling for the sake of exploiting. So when it comes to controlling for the sake of making myself feel good or better because I control you, or I control, material nature, that is deemed bad for our spiritual progress. We may temporarily progress by doing that, but it's not considered good in the long run for our spiritual growth. What is the title?
Some quotes about living entities being under control.
Thank you. So the first is purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, chapter 5, verse 66. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the controller of everything. And the living entities are always controlled, either by the spiritual energy or by the material energy. We saw in that Tatastha Shakti, the man on the shore. The natural position of the living being is always subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one agrees to act in such a position, he attains perfection in life, but if one rebels against this principle, he is in the conditioned state. Krishna book, chapter 87, this is the prayers of the personified Vedas to Sri Krishna. The conditioned souls are not only under the control of the Supreme Lord, but are also conditioned by the control of the material nature. We see just the other day, we had this massive snowstorm, and you must have read that in Virginia, there were drivers who were stuck on the highway for like 27 hours or 30 hours or something. One of them was the senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, who actually ran as a vice presidential candidate a couple seasons ago when Hillary Clinton ran for president. And so he's a pretty powerful guy, yeah? But he could not escape control by Mother Nature when the snowstorm came down and he was stuck. So the conditioned souls are controlled by material nature, who in turn is controlled by Krishna. So Krishna is the ultimate controller, and the living entities feel the control of the material nature. Bhagavatam, again, 10th chapter, 87th chapter of 10th canto, 30th verse. If the countless living entities were all pervading, like Krishna is all pervading, and possess forms that never changed, you could not possibly be their absolute ruler, O immutable one. Who is the immutable one? Krishna. But since they are your localized expansions and their forms are subject to change, you do control them. Lastly, the purport to Bhagavad Gita 18.61, Srila Prabhupada says the individual is always under the Lord's control. Therefore, one's duty is to surrender to Krishna. What's the next title?
Krishna's teachings.
So how do we surrender to Krishna? By accepting his teachings. His teachings come through Bhagavad Gita. They come through Uddhav Gita, his discourse to Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And his teachings come through his great devotees and in talks about Krishna like Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, etc. So we surrender to Krishna by accepting his teachings and trying to imbibe them in our life. One of Krishna's first teachings in Bhagavad Gita is tolerance. So Arjuna has spent a lot of the first chapter and the first few verses of the second chapter explaining to Krishna his logic for not doing his duty as a warrior and not fighting in that great war of Kurukshetra. And Krishna starts by telling him in the 13th verse of second chapter how the soul changes from boyhood to youth to old age and then departs from that particular body into another body and takes another form. And then the immediate next verse is this famous verse where one of Krishna's very first teachings in the Gita is learn to tolerate. Matra sparshas tu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha agama apaino anityaha tam stitikshasva bharata. Matra sparshas tu kaunteya, right? O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress. Happiness is sukha and distress is dukkha. And their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. Shita, Ushna. Shita is winter, Ushna is summer. They arise from sense perception, matra sparshastu, O scion of Bharat. And one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. It's interesting that Krishna talks about tolerating happiness also. He doesn't say, well, enjoy your happiness and tolerate your distress. If you read the verse, he talks about one must learn to tolerate them, which is happiness and distress and heat and cold, or winter and summer, right? And they arise from sense perception. So there's so many things. Like I've heard lectures on this one verse that have lasted for over an hour, one lecture over 1.5 or 2 hours. But I'm not going to dwell on this for a long time, but this is such a key verse in Bhagavad Gita, and it's very, very deep. It goes beyond, what we think, just happiness and distress, summer and winter. I think one key feature of this verse is agama, apaino, anityas. These are three things. That's the third line of the verse. Agama, it comes. Apaino, it goes. Anitya, it is temporary. Nitya means permanent or eternal. Anitya means temporary. So no matter what happens in the course of our material existence, it is all temporary. Think about, just this evening, I was talking with my wife, Sri Radhika, about my nephew. He's a 37-year-old man now. And I suddenly remembered him when he was like a year old. He was the cutest baby. And I was telling her how I used to play with him. He used to jump on me. I used to kiss him and cuddle him. He was such a beautiful, cute baby. He's a beautiful young man, but I don't kiss and cuddle him anymore. He's 37 years old. His body has changed and he is, very different. So, that's one aspect of temporariness. The other aspect is, have you ever noticed, like if you're stuck in that Virginia snowstorm, for example, it lasted about 27 hours. And I'm sure if you were stuck on the highway in that snowstorm and maybe the gas in your car was running low, so you didn't run, you didn't run the heat, I'm sure those 27 hours felt like maybe 27 days or 27 weeks, but they passed. Similarly, we get, say, a new iPhone, and we are so thrilled and we're so happy. And then after 3, 4, 5 days, sometimes a matter of few hours, it's like, it's a phone, right? And then we look for the next source of pleasure. The point is, everything in the material world will pass. So this is a very key message, and we have to learn to tolerate it. Now, I remember when I was young, a young boy, my father, he was a very wise man. He had this saying that he would say to himself and he would tell us. And at that time, I used to think, yeah, whatever, like how it is when you're a teenager, everything your father says or your mother says is viewed with a lens of suspicion. He would say, what you cannot cure, you must endure. And that, over the years, I remember this phrase really often, because a lot of times things happen to us, or we are in the midst of people where you really can't cure what is happening. You just have to endure it. But I grew up in a lower middle class family, so we didn't have a lot of material opulences. In fact, we had practically none. We didn't have a car. We had one little scooter, two-wheeler. We didn't have a telephone. We lived in a tiny little home, and money was always scarce. And so, to break out of that, I did my best to study English and, hear the BBC and the Voice of America and, all that stuff, because I wanted to break out of that lower middle class existence, almost poor existence, and achieve some level of material stability and opulence. And I remember thinking to myself, what can be cured must be endured phrase is all very well. It's so old fashioned and it's rubbish, really, because I was experiencing, or I was studying a lot of the American motivational speakers. And in America, the philosophy is the prevailing, the overwhelming philosophy of the land is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're not dependent on anyone. You become a self-made man and everything depends on you. You work hard and you'll get the riches and the benefits. Yeah, that's the prevailing philosophy here. It's the exact opposite of what you can't cure must be endured. Because here the philosophy is, hey, if you don't like something, change it. You hate your wife, change your wife. You hate your car, toss your car. You hate this circumstance, change it. You don't like your boss, go to another job. Isn't that the philosophy? Where's tolerance? Tolerance is looked down upon. You're like a miserable weakling if you tolerate anything, right? So I was influenced as a young teenager by all these motivational speakers, and I used to think this, what can be cured must be endured, is a rubbish philosophy, until I met devotees. And then I started realizing that actually my father was onto something. And he was actually quoting from Bhagavad Gita in terms of tolerance. And he was talking about tolerating circumstances and things that we cannot change. So far, so good?
It's great so far. Lord Kapil Dev instructs his mother.
Thank you. Titikshavaha karunikaha suridaha sarvadehinam ajata shatravaha shantaha sadhavaha sadhubhushanaha. He's telling his mother the symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful. Titikshava karunikaha. Titikshava is tolerant, karunikaha is merciful. Suridaha sarvadehinam, friendly to all living entities. Ajata Shatravaha, he has no enemies. Shantaha, we say Shanti, 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 he's peaceful. Sadhavaha Sadhu Bhushanaha, he abides by all the scriptures and all his characteristics are sublime. From the purport to this verse, which Srila Prabhupada writes in Teachings of Lord Kapila, is a very important statement. Everyone is tolerant to a degree, but a sadhu's tolerance and an ordinary man's tolerance are different. This is because a sadhu knows that he is not the body. So what does it mean everyone is tolerant to a degree? I mean, think about it. You all, either you study or you work and you have to tolerate stuff, right? You might have a guide in your PhD who, has certain habits that you don't really like, or they tick you off, but you're like, hey, he's my guide, he's otherwise good, I'm going to have to tolerate him. You may have a boss who's less than perfect, or even a perfect boss, but you still have to tolerate certain indignities or certain things you don't like at work, right? You have a partner in life, whether a husband or a wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or people you meet in the community or friends. You tolerate them to some degree because not everyone is on the exact same page as us. But a sadhu's tolerance goes way beyond this. You know why? Because a sadhu knows, I am not this body that I'm in. I am the spirit soul. And the spirit soul, our eternal constitutional position is to be a servant of Krishna's servants. And when we act in that constitutional position, we are happy. And to the extent that we try to act in ways other than that, to try to control, try to enjoy separately, instead of serving Krishna for his enjoyment, when we try to serve ourselves for our enjoyment, to that extent, we are not the body and we suffer from the various indignities and the ups and downs, the heat and the cold, the dualities of this world. And this statement really struck me. If you hear Srila Prabhupada's lectures, you will hear in almost every lecture, he's emphasizing with a sense of urgency, you are not this body. And I used to always wonder, like, it's okay, in 1966, he's telling his disciples, you're not this body. But in 1977, while he's leaving, the movement devotees, some devotees had been around for 11 years. Why is he still talking in his lectures that you're not the body? And the reason is that many of us who may have been practicing for many, many years, we intellectually may know that we are not this body, but we don't always act on that platform. And to the extent that we don't act on a spiritual platform, but we act on a bodily platform, we suffer from the ups and downs of the world. And so to develop real tolerance, we have to imbibe deep within that I'm not this body and to act on that principle. What is the next?
Lord Chaitanya in verse 3 of Shikshashtakam.
This is the seed verse, kind of the foundational verse of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. Trinadapi sunichena tarorapi sahishnana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One who is humbler than a blade of grass, who is more tolerant, there's that word again, than a tree, who does not seek honor for oneself, but is always ready to offer all respect to others. Such a person can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. humbler than a blade of grass. Why is a blade of grass humble? Because a blade of grass is constantly being stepped on by others. Now, there are many articles, if you step on them, they'll pop right back up. But if you step on a blade of grass, it stays down. A tree is the most tolerant living entity. Even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's described, even when a tree is being cut, it does not protest and it does not ask for water. It gives shade to everyone who comes. It does not discriminate that, oh, you water me regularly, you are trying to always take my branches, therefore I won't give you, I'll give only to the person who waters me and feeds me. No, the tree offers shade to everyone and the fruits of that tree to everyone. Then the third characteristic is very, very difficult, does not seek honor for oneself. Let's face it, we are always happy when someone praises us. Someone says something nice about us. As spiritual practitioners, we're trying to be humble. We're trying not to get honor for oneself. But it does feel nice when someone says, Gaur Kumar Prabhu or Yasoda Dulal, you gave a nice class, and you feel, yes, there's a temporary feeling of happiness. Maybe not Gaur Kumar, he's a pure soul, but I'm talking about myself. There's a feeling of happiness. And then, there's an instant recognition that, okay, if I said something good, then the credit goes to my guru and to the teachers, other teachers in my life, and to Krishna, because without empowerment from them, I won't be able to speak. But that tendency is always there. So in this verse, Mahaprabhu is saying, who does not seek honor for oneself, but is always ready to offer all respect to others, which means even those people who don't offer respect to me, don't say nice things about me, if I'm always ready to offer all respect even to them from the heart, not fake, not a politician's offering of respect, but genuinely from the heart, such a person can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. And why is that important? Because in this age of Kali, where all spiritual practices are difficult for the living entities of this age, the easiest form of spiritual practice is to chant the holy name of the Lord. And to the extent that we can do this, to the extent we are actually humble, we're tolerant, we don't seek honor for ourselves, and we always offer respect to others, service to others, it's easier for us to chant the holy name of the Lord, whether we chant on beats or we chant in kirtan as part of a group.
Why do the scriptures emphasize building tolerance?
Lack of tolerance stems from the desire to control. So when we have a desire to control others or material nature, it is impossible for us to offer any service. Actually, a desire to control and exploit is the exact opposite of our constitutional position, which is to render service. So when we are intolerant, it's actually coming from a desire to control. So tolerance helps us to start reducing that innate desire we have acquired over millions and billions of lifetimes of material conditioning. This desire to control is the God complex. I am God. Everything in this world is meant for my pleasure. Everything revolves around me. And that complex, that's false, by the way, no matter what Mayavadis tell you. Mayavadis will tell you that if you practice hard enough and long enough, you will eventually become God, which is the most utter piece of rubbish I've ever heard in my life. But many of them sincerely believe that. And our teachers of the Bhakti tradition teach us that there is only one person who can be God, and that position is already taken. So we can never be God. And so the God complex is what keeps us imprisoned in material life, and it prevents us from realizing happiness. So this whole concept of serving God, the whole concept of serving others and helping them to reach God, it's not designed to make us miserable and make God feel good. It's actually designed to make us feel happy. So for example, say I have let's pick an instrument. Say I have a blender in my kitchen. And if I use the blender to make, nice juices, or, whip up some idli batter, or, anything else that a blender is good for, then I'm using that blender for what is it's meant to do. But suppose I try to use the blender to heat up water. Do you think it'll work? It's not going to work. Even if the blender blades produce a lot of heat, it's not going to heat up the water. So if you try to use the blender to heat up water, you're actually doing something that appliance is not designed to do. So similarly, the God complex is not what we are meant to do. The only thing that will make us happy is to serve. The second reason why the scriptures always emphasize developing tolerance is to help us develop humility. Again, it's the opposite of the God complex, because humility makes us realize how insignificant I am, but my significance comes from plugging into my constitutional position, giving pleasure to the devotees, giving pleasure to God, and then I'm actually happy. To tolerate means to accept that I'm not the center of the universe. It means to acknowledge that other viewpoints might be as valid or even more valid than mine. Usually, have you noticed when we call someone a good friend, usually in material consciousness especially, a good friend is someone who agrees with us, at least to our face. Behind our back, they're usually criticizing us. Have you seen how he talks or how he lives, or, whatever? But to our face, they're like agreeing with us. They're participating in the same enjoyments as us. And there's no tolerance because that person thinks differently. He's rubbish and I'm good. That is the material consciousness. But to tolerate means to acknowledge I don't have all the wisdom in the world. There are other people, their viewpoints can be as valid as mine are. Tolerance promotes harmony among spiritual seekers. So if you notice, when we do, anything, so for example, you folks go on trips sometimes, yes, Gaurakumar Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. We're going to one on 21st of this month.
See, there you go. Now imagine on this trip, you all are like fighting like cats and dogs amongst each other. What kind of a trip would that be? It'd be a miserable experience, right? You would hate it. You'd want to leave halfway through the trip. Or if you're polite and you say, you know what, I'm going to grit my teeth and I'm going to tolerate, you'll never do it again, right? Tolerance promotes harmony. Tolerance is not the same as groupthink. Groupthink means no one is allowed to have their own opinions. Everyone has to think a certain way. It's called, like a dictatorship, right? That's not tolerance. Tolerance means I can still have my viewpoint. I can serve as per my inspiration, but for the purpose of the greater good, for the harmony of the group, and for the harmony of the offering that the group is seeking to make, I'm willing to take a subordinate position, and I'm willing to do what it takes to do that. That is tolerance, and it promotes harmony. And harmony makes an offering pleasing for the recipient. And as bhakti practitioners, who are we trying to please? That recipient is Krishna. So harmony is very pleasing for Krishna. Again, remember, I'm not saying we cannot have our inspirations, our individuality. In fact, in the spiritual world, when we read the Shastras, you'll see that there are so many uniquenesses or so many unique features among every single person in the spiritual world. And they all have their own specific offering to Krishna, which makes it very pleasing for him. And they are very happy because they are doing what is right for their constitutional position. They're making their offering, but they're doing it in harmony. They're not saying, I will do whatever I want, and then Radharani and Tulsi Devi and others can do whatever they want. That's not harmony. So harmony makes the offering very pleasing, and harmony is achieved by tolerance. And that tolerance comes from knowing the higher ideal. I'm not this body, I'm a spirit soul, and I'm trying to develop my relationship of loving service to Shri Krishna and to his devotees. And that's why I'm tolerating for a higher purpose. That's what makes the offering pleasing.
Examples of tolerance from Shastra out of so many.
Yeah, so if you look at the scriptures, you'll see so many examples, and I'm not going to tell the stories behind all of this, but in Ramayana, Vibhishan, the brother of Ravan, he had to tolerate so many insults. Ravana was like, not just Ravana's sons, the other brothers of Ravana, the soldiers, they were all accusing Vibhishan of being a traitor, of being a disgrace to the Rakshasa race, because he was urging Ravana to give back Sita, the wife of Lord Ram. And he was telling him, he was giving him good counsel, and he was saying, please, you've stolen someone else's wife. She's not your wife. Please give her back. You will come to ruin. He was giving him good advice, but he got blasphemy in return. And he simply tolerated until one day he was kicked out of there, and he said, fine, I'm going over. My eternal position is with Lord Ram, so I'm going over. Lord Ram and Sita Devi themselves, they tolerated so many things. 14 years of forest life. Sita Devi was, she's the original goddess of fortune. And Sita Devi living in the forest, sleeping on, the ground, eating roots and shoots. I mean, it was a life of hardship. So they themselves tolerated so much, all in aid of the higher principle of Lord Ram wanting to keep his father Dashrath's word and not allowing Dashrath to fall down from his position of truthfulness. From Krishna Lila, any examples of tolerance people want to throw out?
Devaki.
Yeah, Devaki, yes. Someone else had something?
Kunti, someone is saying Kunti Maharani.
Yeah,
Parikshit Prabhu.
Kunti Maharani. Anyone else? I mean, all the Shastras are full of this.
From the Mahabharat, Vidura. From the Mahabharat, Vidura.
Vidura, yes. Yes. So I've got Draupadi, I've got Vidura. Draupadi tolerated so much. She was, there was an attempt made to disrobe her, a proud queen, in front of like all the men in the court. Vidura tolerated so much. Kunti Devi, someone said. The Pandavas tolerated so much. There were so many attempts made on their life. They were humiliated, and yet they stayed true. They took shelter of Krishna in every situation. From Chaitanya Leela, Haridas Thakur, he was blasphemed by his Muslim brethren. He was born in a Muslim family, but he used to chant Hare Krishna. He was attracted to Krishna's holy names. He was blasphemed by the Hindus. You're a Muslim, why are you chanting our names? Finally, the Muslim king ordered him beaten to death, and he was beaten brutally. The description of his beating will just make you wince and cringe when you read that. And he was beaten brutally. Of course, Lord Chaitanya later revealed that Haridas Thakur did not feel any pain because Lord Chaitanya invisibly came and covered his body with his own. And then Mahaprabhu took off his upper garment and turned his back to the devotees and showed his back was black and blue, just from taking the beating on behalf of Haridas Thakur. But Haridas Thakur, all the blasphemy, all the insults, all the put downs, he was enduring and he was tolerating, just taking shelter of Krishna. Lord Nityananda is Balaram himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in this incarnation as Nityananda, he was going door to door, begging everyone, please just add Krishna to your life. Krishna is your father. Krishna is your mother. Krishna is your treasure. He's the source of your life. Just chant Krishna's names. And some people, it is described, would spit in his face. Some people would slam the door shut. Some people would chase him out. And the same Balaram, who had killed so many fearsome demons in Krishna Leela, huge, gigantic demons, he would just humbly roll on the dust in front of their houses and say, you can do anything to me, but just take Krishna's name and make your life successful. So much tolerance.
How can we build tolerance?
Always a difficult question. So the first one is to seek out role models of tolerance and humility. So, we can find so many different role models of varying degrees of tolerance and humility, but we can seek inspiration from different people that we know, from the teachers, in our community, from the people that we see, whether it's on YouTube or we hear about them from different sources. So role models are important. And why is that so? Because when we see someone who is or was like us, and they show levels of tolerance and humility that are higher than ours, then we feel inspiration that, okay, maybe I can do it too. So it's important to seek out these role models. The second is to develop self-awareness of our own shortcomings and strengths too. But self-awareness is really critical. In my previous company, the CEO of the company, my boss, he would look for self-awareness as one of the fundamental characteristics of the people that he hired. Because his point was, if you're not self-aware, you don't know where to seek help. You think you're strong in everything. And then you make mistakes, and then a big project or a big, negotiation or deal goes down the toilet because you were not aware enough that you lack certain things that you needed for that deal, and you could have sought out help, but you didn't. So in spiritual life too, it's good to be self-aware. And, two things are good for that. One is to cultivate introspection and reflection ourselves. Take the time every day, every interaction we have, try to read body language, the polite, sometimes indirect language that people tell us, when someone's uncomfortable with us, they might not tell us directly like, hey, Yasoda, Dulal, don't do this or do this, but they might tell us indirectly. So being aware of things like that, but also having at least one friend or mentor who can give us some very honest feedback. And if you have a partner, trying to make the journey with your partner, like my wife is one of my best mentors and friends. She's very wise. She loves me, and she accepts me and tolerates me for all my shortcomings and weaknesses, but is not afraid to tell me very direct feedback. And that feedback helps me to grow. So if we have friends, mentors, partner, that is really good. And self-introspection to develop some self-awareness so that we know where we need to make progress. This third point is really important for developing tolerance. Spiritual communities are like hospitals. So you might think to yourself, like the Bhakti Center or New Vrindavan, which I believe you've been to or you're about to go to. They are temples, they're not hospitals, but they are hospitals. Other than the doctors and the nurses there, that is the teachers and the guides, everyone is in that community to be treated for something. Someone might be there to be treated for greed, to be treated for lack of humility, for lust, for anger, for illusion. Someone may be there because they have this God complex to the nth degree. But everyone is in the spiritual community to be treated for something. And why is that important for tolerance? Because we have these high expectations of devotees, and we get really messed up when sometimes devotees don't measure up to maybe our artificial standards of the pedestal we've put them on. So cut others a break. Someone's acting in a way that, is perhaps not the best role model for in spiritual life. Remember that they also have their conditioning. See, the tendency is I might look at someone who is very greedy and feel very happy and proud. I'm not greedy, so I'm better than him. But the problem is I might not be greedy, but I might have an anger problem. I might have a lust problem. I might be under illusion. right? So the point is not to feel superior that, haha, see that other person, I'm better than him or her because I don't have their problem. But be self-aware. We do have problems. That's why we are in the material world. We're not perfect yet. But by the same token, when someone acts in a way which disappoints us, we can give them feedback if we have a relationship with them, and we can express our feelings, but cut them a break, tolerate when they don't always measure up. This next point, very important. Read and hear from the Bhakti scriptures daily. The famous motivational speaker Zig Ziglar said, we know that motivation is hard and needs constant renewal, but so is cleanliness. That is why we recommend take a shower daily, right? So we eat daily, we take a shower daily, sometimes 3 times a day, depending on how hot it is. We do so many things daily, we exercise daily. We must, for the sake of our spiritual life, have some injection of the Bhakti scriptures every day. That'll help us to develop tolerance, humility, and all the other good qualities that Krishna emphasizes for us to make spiritual progress. It's also important to practice what we read and see and imbibe in spiritual life. The whole point of reading Shastra or the Bhakti scriptures is that when things happen in our life which are against what we were planning, or they are a setback or a shortcoming, or they trip us up, then we can put into practice everything we have read. Or if we achieve a lot of success or we get a lot of opulence, also remember Krishna says tolerate happiness. So then we are able to not get carried away and go away from spiritual life on the waves of that material happiness. So we can tolerate it. We can pause and say, okay, I've got this. How can I use it to serve Krishna? So both ways, whether it's distress or happiness, but that the teachings of the scripture come alive when we practice. Otherwise, they stay in the books. Remember that I'm not the body. This is not an easy one to internally completely realize till you've gone through a sufficient amount of cleansing by reading daily, associating with devotees, serving, tolerating, developing humility. But it's always good to remember this mantra that I'm not the body. And what we said earlier in that Bhagavad Gita 2.14, agama apaino anityaha. Anityaha is everything is temporary. So something may be happening that's causing you distress right now. Tolerate it, because you know that something else is around the corner. And even if there is happiness, you don't have to be on with bated breath saying, oh my God, something's going to happen to trip me up. No, but just don't get so attached to it. Use it for Krishna's service. Remember that everything is temporary. Even if you have lasting happiness in this world, when we leave our body, it's going to go, right? Anything connected with the body. So it is temporary in that sense. So when we remember that, it's easier to develop tolerance. Reflections, comments, or questions or corrections?
First of all, thank you so much, Yasoda, Dulal, Prabhu. I mean, this was such a comprehensive perspective on tolerance. You covered almost every topic. It was scriptural, it was practical, it was inspirational. So thank you. I just mentioned a few points that I really liked. So tolerance is looked down upon in this world, which is very true. And sadhu is able to tolerate better because he knows that he is not the body. The lack of tolerance stems from the desire to control. I really like the example of the blender to heat up water. Then how much ever you try, the blender can never be used to heat up water. And I liked 5 points that you mentioned on how to build tolerance. So seek out role models, develop self-awareness, be part of spiritual communities, read, hear Bhakti scriptures daily, and practice what you read. And always remember that I'm not the body and everything in this world is temporary. So thank you so much, Yasoda, Dulal, Prabhu. So Megha has a question, but before that, So Nitya told me on chat that she has a question, so she can go first and then followed by Megha. Thank you.
Sure, and thank you for tolerating my class. Nitya? Okay, maybe she's putting Radha to sleep. So Megha, please go ahead.
I'll start by saying this was just amazing. I really appreciate that you take time and organize this. It's like 10 p.m. right now. So thank you for that. I have one quick comment, like, thanks for today's lecture. Like, it really resonated with me because I'm trying to practice this concept of impermanence. And I read about this last year in a Buddhist monk's book. They talk about like meditation and like how everything is impermanent. And I was reminding myself in happy moments that this is impermanent. So like, it really resonated with me. So now the question, what are your thoughts on speaking up for yourself when we are exploited and disrespected? Do you consider it as an act of intolerance? And then following up on this same point, is taking action to get out of poverty, again, an act of intolerance? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind comments. So yeah, speaking up for yourself, or if you're being exploited, standing up for yourself, no, that's not intolerance. You're just, you can do it in a spirit of, hey, this is against my dignity. It's not something that I want to put up with, and it bothers me, and therefore I'm speaking up. So to my mind, it's not intolerance, because otherwise the nature of the material world is that we will be run over. And it'll be impossible for us to live. Like, I work in corporate life, and we finalized a budget last month, and the head of sales pulled a fast one on me literally the day before I was going to present the budget to the board of directors. And she, we had tied up the sales numbers for the plan for next year a month prior, and she pulled a fast one on me, saying, she went to the CEO and said, oh, I don't know how Yogesh, which is my legal name, how Yogesh put these numbers in. I don't agree with the budget numbers. And I got into a pretty direct and very blunt discussion with her in front of the CEO. And I stood my ground and I said, absolutely not. And here are all the discussions we've had. Here are the email exchanges. Lori's had a month to discuss this. I am not changing the number. She's going to attain this damn number next year. I don't care how she does it. Right? And I succeeded. So that was standing up for myself, because she had changed her mind, because she suddenly realized that maybe the numbers she had committed to were not right. And she was trying to throw me under the bus by saying that, oh, he never consulted with me, which was totally wrong. So, I mean, that's just one example of how I dealt with it. Doesn't mean that's the right necessarily way, but you don't have to stand up for that. The other thing is, if you see someone else being exploited, you should absolutely speak up. This is not a philosophy of like, oh, Gaur Kumar is being trampled upon, in his job or in something, or someone is being abused, like in a domestic partner abuse kind of situation, or someone is being, badly exploited. Absolutely go to law enforcement, go, do whatever needs to be done. Do it in a way that you are not, endangered. Like, someone's not coming to kill you, for example, if you're tackling, someone with an abuse problem or things like that. But absolutely, that is not intolerance. That is just, the way you exist in this material world. You have to stand up at some points. But where intolerance comes about is, say you have an extreme desire to always be right, and all your relationships, you are the boss, and everything that I say goes, and no one else can ever have a voice, right? That, that is not desirable, because that is coming from a desire to control, desire to be powerful, or enjoy or gratify your senses. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. But like if you're fighting for yourself, like in one part of your life, like for example getting out of poverty, for example, then it sort of like permeates in other parts of your life as well in negative ways, yeah, but that totally makes sense what you just said.
Yeah, and your intention really matters, because ours is not a philosophy that we don't want to be either in poverty consciousness or richness consciousness. We want to be in Krishna consciousness, right? So no matter what our situation is, we can serve Krishna, we can serve his devotees. That's our consciousness. But in order to do our service nicely, if like I grew up in lower middle class family, we didn't have a lot of things. And things like, I grew up in Baroda in the western part of India. It used to be hot and humid, which is a climate that I particularly hate. So my first act on getting my first salary was to buy an air conditioner, because we couldn't afford that when I was growing up. So again, that's something, I know my body, I need to be cool at all times. So, to do my service nicely, if I need that, I don't know that that necessarily is, I'm putting myself into extreme material consciousness. I'm just doing it so that I can be well situated, not have anxiety, and then I can do my Krishna conscious service properly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yasoda Prabhu. So first of all, before we move ahead, how much time do you have, Yashodaji? Because there are a lot of hands raised.
Sure. I think this is a nice discussion. Nitya wanted to go next.
So Nitya next, followed by Krishnan Prabhu, followed by Parikshit Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for your wonderful class. I'll be quick. I really like the phrase that you said, but what you cannot endure, what you cannot cure, you must endure. I think that's gonna stay with me. It really resonated with me. I do have a question. So what measures can we take such that the tolerance does not lead to suppression and eventually erupt at a later point? Like we keep tolerating. What measures can we do so that we can check on that aspect?
If I can paraphrase your question, Nitya, what you're saying is maybe you tolerate, but internally it's causing dissonance in your mind because you're suppressing your emotions and it's not healthy, and at some point it might erupt. Is that what you were asking?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I think, suppression is never good. Krishna also talks to Arjuna about what does suppression achieve, right? You ultimately have to stay true to your nature. So if there's something happening that's bothering you in any kind of relationship, it's imperative that you bring it out and you say, this is really bothering me, and try to work it out with whoever it is, whether it's a friend, your partner, or your boss or anyone, because that suppression, you're right, is no good, and it's going to lead to a blow up, or you're going to just be miserable, right? But I heard Gauranga Prabhu, one of my topmost gurus, Gauranga Prabhu say in a lecture, he used the acronym TEAR, like, tears, but TEAR, T for Thomas, EAR, as the foundation for every relationship. And T stands for tolerance, E stands for encouragement, A stands for appreciation, and R stands for respect. So TEAR, yeah. And these four things, if they're there in a relationship, you'll have a strong relationship. And when you suppress something that is bothering you, that respect part is what is getting trampled, right? So you want to make sure that it comes out and you're able to address it with the person with whom this is a problem.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. That was very nice. Thank you.
Krishnan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this was such a wonderful class. I got so many practical points in the class. Even I wanted to that the same phrase that Nitya Mataji said. That resonated with me as well. And even your example of the budget was extremely was extremely useful, because I was trying to connect it with the material situation. In the material world, tolerance is taken as weakness. And a quick comment that I had was, sometimes, and this is, I'd like a reaction on this, is sometimes tolerance is seen as not sufficient. I heard this example once. Let's say somebody does a mean thing to me. I have three choices. One is I can hate the person and say I'm going to take revenge. That's one choice. The second choice is I can tolerate the person. The third choice is I can say, this person, something's probably going wrong with them. I really wish that they have a better day, and I move on. So so my question for you is tolerance enough, or is that am I parsing too much into this into the word?
Well, so it really depends on the situation. Thank you for your kind comments up front. It really depends on the situation, because every situation is so unique. If you're not likely to have an interaction with that person again, like I'll give you an example. We had a plumbing leak about a year and a half ago, and water was falling from the ceiling in the basement, and we had to get it done immediately, rectified. And my wife and I, we called the first plumber who said he could come there within a reasonable time. He turned out to be a cheat, and he charged us like $600 for something which we later learned could have been done for like $100, right? Now that, unfortunately, he fixed the leak and he went away. So for us, that was like, what, we learned a lesson from this. Make sure we keep this company's name in our database and never call this person again, right? Note his number, maybe put a Google review to protect others from getting exploited like this in future. And he was very rude about it too, on top of that. So that was one instance. But if it's like the instance which I gave, the head of sales, I have to deal with her on a daily basis, right? And I also know that she was being extremely slippery, and if we had changed everything, the consequences of that were that my team would have to work the next 24 to 48 hours overnight, nonstop, to change everything that was done in the budget. Because when you present to the board, you're not just presenting 1 or 2 pages, right? You're presenting a whole package, and everything has to tie and so on. So I put my foot down, because it wasn't just about my ego, it was about consequences down the road. And I knew that what she was asking for was an easier way to attain her sales targets, when I knew that the company could benefit from the higher targets. So I put my foot down. We had an extensive, heated discussion in front of the CEO, and I pushed back on her and beat her down to what she had originally committed to. That was because that was a lasting consequence. So their tolerance would have been a weakness, because in future, unreasonable things would have been dumped on me and my team as well. So it's not always cut and dried, but tolerance in a spiritual sense, sometimes you take the lower position, or or you can say the higher road, even when you're right, simply for the sake of the relationship. And I don't mean in a case of abuse, because remember, anything where there's an abusive relationship, there's no question of tolerance. You got to set things right? So it's outside of that. But say you're trying to do a project together, a spiritual project, you're trying to do a seva, and you're right about something. The person you're serving with, you're going to serve with them for the next 15, 20, 30 years, maybe all your life. You might want to, for the sake of the relationship, take the higher road, so to speak, and give in. It doesn't matter. So that tolerance is different. So it really depends on the context, whether it's material situation, how lasting it is. Are you likely to see that person again? Is it going to recur, have permanent or long-term implications for you? And then in the spiritual sense, what will develop a stronger relationship so that you can do service better and you can improve your consciousness?
Thank you, Prabhu. That was extremely useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Parikshit Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. Hare
Hey,
Krishna,
Haribol,
Yasoda,
Parikshit.
Prabhu. Hi, Prabhu.
Really?
Thank you, Guruji. Wonderful class. Really liked how you started with the Tasta Shakti. It was really like well planned presentation, I would say. Like you mentioned, control what is important, what is not. References from Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, and like why to build tolerance and how to build it. So thank you for putting effort for us. I have a question where from the section where you were mentioning about why to build tolerance. So you mentioned a point like to tolerate means to acknowledge that others' viewpoint might be as valid or even more valid than mine. So my question is like, so we're trying to practice bhakti, and this tendency of feeling superior among others, like non-devotees or people who don't follow what we follow. So how to see this principle and imbibe in this particular situation? If you can share your thoughts.
So specifically in relation to people who are not yet practicing bhakti, is that what you meant? Yeah. So this is something like sometimes we get, we have a material interaction with someone who's not a bhakti practitioner, who's not a devotee, and we get disappointed or we get like blown away, like, wow, look how, fallen that consciousness is, right? And we may have a tendency to feel superior, but that's something we should guard against because, depending again on the situation and who that person is, you may or may not be able to do anything to change that person, but it's not good for our consciousness to ever feel superior to someone else, that I'm better than that plumber who came because look how mode of ignorance this guy was. I'm practicing bhakti. I chant Hare Krishna, read Bhagavad Gita, like that. It's detrimental to our own progress. It might be true. Like you might stand there and look at me and that, that plumber who cheated us and say, wow, that plumber was in such a mode of ignorance and he was not a nice guy. But for me to sit there and feel superior, that's not good for my spiritual life. And the whole principle of amanina manadena, right? Not expecting honor for myself, but giving all respect to others. It's that principle. Mahaprabhu doesn't say give respect to all devotees and not expect any respect from devotees. He says don't expect respect at all and give honor to everyone. So my wife has her hand raised. I don't know if that was a comment or a question.
Please, Shri Radhika Mataji, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to also answer this question a little bit. I think so. It's through the compassion to others. We can maintain this attitude of being patient to what they are going through, because we've been given this gift in philosophy and association through which we can reflect and understand ourselves and progress in our spiritual life and have those tools and have a main goal of pleasing Krishna. So through compassion, we can be patient with others, with non-devotee people. And that way we won't criticize them and see their faults. In fact, we will accept what is going on in reality in this material world, and we just will be filled with compassion. That way, we won't be aggravated.
Thank you, Shri Radhika.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Who's next?
Suman Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you so much for this wonderful class. I could see how you even took out purports from Srila Prabhupada's purport and brought it out. Prabhu, just a quick question is like tolerance is like a next step for tolerance is humility, or does humility encompasses everything including tolerance? I mean, is it like a subset?
They are definitely intertwined with each other. To the extent we are genuinely humble, we are able to tolerate because we see everything in connection with Krishna, that's genuine humility, right? Humility does not mean thinking that I'm so miserable, I don't have any qualifications, right? I'm the lowest of the low. That's not humility. Humility means whatever I have been given is given to me by Krishna, whatever insignificant gifts I might have, and it's meant to be used in Krishna's service. And the purpose of my existence is to develop my attraction for loving service to Krishna. And that humility, so going from a me-centeredness to a Krishna-centeredness, right? And that humility will then engender a lot of tolerance, because then you see everything in connection with Krishna. That's why this teaching of Prabhupada's, that I'm not this body, Krishna's teaching, right, in Bhagavad Gita, is so important. It's the fundamental basis of our bhakti. But practicing tolerance, even when we don't feel it, and trying to tolerate on an ongoing basis will help us to develop our humility also. So it goes both ways.
Thank you, Prabhu. So thank you also for this clarification, feeling like low, down, miserable is actually, or the inferiority complex is not actually something humility in the ultimate sense.
No. And actually, if you think of it, when Arjuna was, when he threw down his bow and said, "Oh, Govinda, I cannot fight," right? Beginning of 2nd chapter, he says that, right? After giving all his arguments for why he cannot do his duty as a warrior, Arjuna is the most skilled warrior in the planet, right? But at that moment, he didn't have the will, right? And so when you have a lot of skill, but you don't have a will to do something, that usually is, when you're feeling low and depressed, right? And that's what Arjuna was feeling. He was feeling depressed. He was feeling very low. And he was saying, if I kill all my family members, what am I going to gain, right? Even if I gain a kingdom, right? And the people with whom I want to enjoy, they will be gone. So he was forgetting his duty. But when we read Shastra, it sharpens our will, not just our skill, right? So Shastra gives us the lenses with which to view everything that happens in the world, to us and around us. And then we can actually say, you know what? Now I've got the will to act in accordance with what the Shastra is telling me. And so it equips us with the will, even though we may have the skills and we may lack the will.
Wonderful.
And thank you for joining. Aren't you like somewhere in India or Bangladesh or somewhere? I forget where you are.
Yeah, I'm in Madhya Pradesh.
Madhya
India.
Pradesh, yeah. Wow. It's like real dedication to joining this Sangha. Huh? I know you're a key part of this Sangha. Thank you for joining.
Any one last question, anybody? Okay, if there are no more questions, I just want to really thank Yasoda Dulal Prabhu for taking the time and being with us, even though it's so late. So really appreciate that, Prabhu. And just a couple of quick announcements. So next week, Krishnan Prabhu will be speaking on chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, followed by Lekha Mataji, and we'll end the month with Shamananda Prabhu speaking on humility. So as we always do, if anybody, like before we log off, if you can just, for those of you who have not spoken yet, if you can just speak one small phrase or something that you want to take home from this class, that'll be very helpful. Thank you. Please unmute and speak one point or one practical tip that you'll take home or something that you liked, anything. Thanks. Vishal?
Yeah. I liked what you cannot cure, you must endure. That will stay with me, and I'll try to practice that also. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thanks to Yasoda Dulal Prabhu's father.
Yes, thank you.
Karan Prabhu?
Yes. For me, what you said from 2.14, like everything will pass, everything is temporary, will stay with me.
Thank you, Prabhu. Lekha Mataji? Okay.
So, Hare Krishna. Yes, so for me, the biggest takeaway was like really knowing the difference between what is tolerance, what is intolerance, what is like really distinguishing between situations. I think that is like my biggest takeaway.
Thank you. And Athena?
So many things that hasn't been said much was the lack of tolerance is a desire to control. That really resonated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Athena. Jignasha? Okay, Dhaval?
I really like the discussion point regarding tolerance. Like with different people, the tolerance levels might be different. Like Prabhuji gave example of the plumber and the example of a colleague. So that was really inspiring.
Thank you, Dhaval. Soham?
Yeah, Prabhuji, I think I understood in depth like what is tolerance with all the beautiful examples Prabhuji gave.
Thank you. Sudhanshu?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I think the greatest lessons around was tolerance, and through your examples, I could see some vices in myself, and I will work on correcting those things which I've learned about today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sudhanshu. Vrinda?
Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the amazing lecture. I really like the last part, like when you were telling Nitya Mataji about the tear, like the abbreviation. That's something that will really stay with me, and also that what you can't cure, you should endure. So yeah, thank you, Hare Krishna.
And last but not least, Jitendra Prabhu, please go ahead.
Yeah, I like that slide about what tolerance fosters, like harmony, and then one of the things that tolerance brings about is humility. It brings about humility in us. So I like that, and it is more of an impetus for me to become more tolerant, or rather start becoming tolerant at least.
Okay.
Thank you. Me too. I hope to become more tolerant every day.
Thank you again, Yasoda Dulal Prabhu.
Thank you.
Very much. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grace Yasoda Dulal Prabhu ki jai. Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Shri Radhika Mataji ki jai.
Jai. Hari Bol.
Thank you. Hari Hari.